Assumptions are the bane of good decision making and problem solving, because it's so often that, and we do have to make assumptions, but when they're unchecked assumptions, and we don't recognize the uncertainty in them, that's when we get into trouble.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Helping People Perform. Delighted to be joined today all the way from Louisville in Kentucky. We have keynote speaker, mind performance and illusion expert, and recovering magician. Welcome to the show today, Steve Haffner.
Oh, thank you, Paul. It's great to be here.
Oh, great to have you on board. I mean, I've been approached by a few people to guest on the show, and very few prick up the ears and prick up the eyes as much as when I saw your note there. And I've got to know what this is all about and how you help people perform. So love to hear your story. So maybe let's kick off with a bit of your backstory. What got you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, when you're one of the biggest decisions you make in your life is when you're deciding, you're high school senior, you're ready to go into college. You got to decide what you're going to study, and which means what path you're going to go on for your life. Well, I was always very creative. I loved performing. I loved writing, so I thought I'd go into something creative. So what did I decide to major in? Computer science, which actually has, an element of creativity to it, of course, but that was the safe route. There were a lot of computer programming jobs. This was in the early 80s, and trying to do something in the performing arts, that would have been a more difficult road to follow than, and I liked programming. So that's how I went. I had a 30-year career in IT as a programmer, systems analyst, got into management. I was actually a business analyst with a big healthcare insurance company. And when in 2011, I decided to just quit that career, it was a stable, high-paying career, and become a magician.
Okay.
People are like, "What? How could you do that?" And some eyebrows were raised at the time. Although the director of the department I worked in told me, because I thought he would laugh at me when I told him what I was doing.
Yeah.
But he smiled and he said, he wished he had a passion that he could make a living at, and so he could get rid out of the corporate world as well. So that made me feel good. So that's what I did. I took the leap. Now, I had enough savings built up that I could make the change and work through the transition. And I became a full-time magician. I started off doing kids shows. Then I was doing adult shows in which I was usually a mentalist, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a branch of magic. When you see somebody do mind reading or predicting what people are going to do, those kind of things. And adults tend to react a little bit better to that than to the visual magic.
Right.
Although, adults like that too, but nobody really knows what the mind can do. Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's more mystery just inherent if it's mentalism. So anyway, long story short, got into doing corporate shows, but what I had discovered was that so many groups, companies, associations that have big events, conferences, conventions, not very many of them have entertainment or an entertainment budget. And the ones that do, they usually want a musician or a band or, maybe a comedian. So I think magician's kind of far down on the list.
Yeah.
But they all want entertainment. They just can't call it that. And so they get keynote speakers who are entertaining.
Right.
And so I'm like, this I think is a good opportunity for me. So I was doing both for a while. I, put my toe in to the speaking world. I kind of stubbed it at first. My first gig I didn't think went well at all. I stepped back for about a year and then decided to go back into it. And then after that started rolling, I stopped doing just entertainment shows so I could focus on the speaking side of it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the program's all about helping people perform. And that was a big impetus to it. And nothing's wrong with just entertainment.
Right.
We need entertainment, right? People will pay a lot for entertainment. There's value there.
Yeah.
but I wanted to add something more. I wanted to give people something that they could take with them to help them, in their life to perform better,
Right.
to succeed more and achieve more of their goals. So I guess, I can keep going on this line.
Yeah.
So that's, when when I made that, transition into speaking, and I thought, what did I learn as a magician that I can use to help people?
Yeah.
And what I discovered, so the first thing I discovered is that magic doesn't happen in the hands of the magician. It only happens in the minds of the audience members. That's the only place the magic happens. And so magicians actually learn that it's very easy to fool the human mind and manipulate it. You just have to know where the weak spots are.
Right.
But those same weak spots that magicians know how to exploit and manipulate to give the impression of magic, they affect us in all of our other thinking and decision making as well, in our work and in our personal lives. So if I could help people discover, understand a little bit more about what their brain is doing, then they would be able to perform better. If they could take that back and apply that to their work. I call it from aha to ta-da, where ahas are new insights. You learn something new, you learn a new perspective maybe on something you already knew. And the ta-da part is when you take that and you apply it, incorporate it into your life, into your work, and you improve. Those are the ta-das that you get.
Wonderful. I love that, and because I've always been a fan of. Well, I've always said any sort of course, any sort of event, anything that is there to improve you is only a success if it changes your behaviors.
Exactly.
Anything else is entertaining at best, and quite often nowhere near that level either.
Right, just a useless appendage if you don't put it into place.
Precisely, and there's some amazing stuff in there. And I've been scribbling down notes here because there's so much great stuff I want to delve into a little bit further. One of the bits, right? Let's go back to why magic. So, what was magic always a passion growing up, and you sort of moved through, or did you actually move from other passions into the magic world?
Yeah, well, and when I was about 9 or 10 years old for my birthday, I had an interest in magic, and we had one local magic shop here in Louisville, and my dad took me there, and I got some tricks, and I was really into it then for a while, but like most kids, I kind of, I guess, grew out of it, or at least got away from it, right?
Yeah.
And then when I had my own kids, I stumbled. It was kind of a fortuitous accident. I was at a bookstore, and they had a sidewalk sale, and there was a book, Encyclopedia of Magic. And I thought, wonder if my kids would like magic as much as I did when I was a kid, So I got the book. My kids, yeah, they kind of liked it, but I really got into it again. And I joined the local magic club, and I did charity events and did a few birthday parties for friends and my kids. And I really liked it. And, and then being in the magic club, I talked to other magicians and kind of got a feel for, well, is there really a market here? Can people make a living doing magic? And it appeared that they could. Now it was a really difficult decision to make that jump.
Right.
As you can imagine. Now my wife was supportive, which you have to get buy-in from your spouse if you're going to make a big move like this.
Yeah.
And I agonized over it. I mean, I didn't like the job I had at the time. I didn't feel like I was a good fit. I wanted to make this jump into magic, but it was risky, and it was, I had that part of my lizard brain telling me, you can't do this. This is irresponsible. You need to grow up. You've got a family to support. It was in the middle of a recession, also. So, but I finally got up the courage to do it, and was glad I did. And I told you about how when I was younger, I was into creative writing and performing. I was in the plays, and magic, that uses both. You're performing, and if you're going to be good, you have to write your own material. So I, got to incorporate that too. And it felt like I was using more of my God-given talents and gifts than I had been. And, like I said, I don't regret my computer career or that decision at all.
Yeah.
It was a good career, but I felt it was time to do something different with my other talents.
Brilliant. And I think that's a lesson that we can all learn in terms of, I got challenged by this by a great coach of mine a good few years ago when I was in New Zealand. It's like he was asking me what my passions were. You know, what are my values? What are my passions? Where do I want to go? And I've always been passionate about cooking. And the great question was, so what do you want to do with that? Do you want that to be your career? And I was thinking through it and thought, no, actually, that's my relaxing space. That's how I unwind. So I don't want my career to move into that. Whereas it might be for other people, I'm so passionate about it, I want to make it my career. And if that's something that's driving you, then there's always opportunities to follow. And one of the other bits, and it sort of ties into this as well, that I wrote down, which on our previous conversation we had before the recording, I just love this, the fact that you caught on to the fact that people want to be entertained, but they didn't have the budget for entertainment. So by calling it something else, by calling it a keynote speech, by calling it something in the language where your buyer is wanting that value, and or has a budget for that thing, then you can sort of tweak how you deliver it. And exactly. What was the aha moment? How did that come about for you in that space?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So if you're going to be a keynote speaker, generally, there's motivational speakers, which one of my programs kind of, I guess, would fall under that name, but I don't really like that term very much, motivational. But they expect from keynote speakers, and it depends on the client, and the event and the type of audience. Sometimes they just want something to energize their group, to entertain them, but you have to have some sort of useful content in there so they can call it education. Right. So they can put it in there as an education. Sometimes their members can actually get CEUs, education units, for the different segments that they go to during a conference, the different sessions, I should say. So there has to be some content, and so and even now when I talk to a potential client, I say, do you think are you looking for something that's more entertaining, or do you want more practical takeaways? And I do both, but I can lean more into the entertainment. So 2 days ago I had an engagement, and it was a luncheon. He said this is a time they've been at the event for a day and a half, and they've taken in all this technical information, about their industry.
Yeah.
And I want them to have something that's going to let them think a little different, have some fun, during the luncheon, and so that it's not just more stuff to fill up their brain and overload them.
Yeah.
So I did have some good some takeaways, but I did focus more on the entertainment side on that.
Yeah. And I think that's a great lesson for anybody as well in the keynote speaking sort of world, where the material itself can remain relatively the same, but how you deliver it and the angle that you give it, that's where you're really leaning into the value that your client at the time is wanting, and leaning towards. So, yeah,
right. And for people out there that are considering getting into speaking, I have people say, "Oh, I wish I had a skill like magic that I could put." You do have a skill. It's called your life, your stories, storytelling. Because I incorporate that, and I incorporate humor. But everybody has interesting things that have happened in their life that they can turn into valuable lessons that they can share with other people.
Right.
And it's a skill. It takes learning, and so when you dive into it, you're not going to be very good. I wasn't, certainly, but don't feel like you have to be able to, play an instrument or do magic or juggle or something to be a keynote speaker.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and maybe it goes back to, and because it's the crux of this podcast, and you've already touched upon some of this in terms of you're helping people perform. So when we talk about who you help and how you help them, what would people sort of naturally get from you? How would they engage with you? What does that look and feel like? And then how do you help them off the back of that?
The way I kind of alluded to this earlier, but think about your mind as the engine of a car. You have a goal, either a big life goal or even a smaller goal, and you want to get there. So it's basically you're trying to get from where you are, point A, to that destination, point B. So you need to drive there. Think of your brain as the engine of your vehicle, that's going to get you there. Now, the more you know about your brain, the more if a car engine, the more you know about it, the better you can keep it tuned, the better you can make it perform. And the same with the mind. Our mind does so many things under the hood in the subconscious level that we're not aware of. And if we can understand more of what's going on, well, we could better mitigate the negative effects and therefore perform better. So I'm kind of what we call industry agnostic. So there's not a specific industry that I help, but I help professionals and leaders, anyone that wants to perform better, that uses their brain as part of their job, which is most people.
Fantastic. You've hit on a wonderful niche there.
Right.
And
you
so,
know, and your ability, I have a program that I started last year on problem solving.
Okay.
And if you think about problem solving, it's essential. If any of the organizations that, you know, the top business publications that do surveys of employers, they all list problem solving as one of the essential skills for 21st century employees.
Yep.
And yet, how many people have actually taken any kind of formal training or course or even read a book on problem solving? Some have, but not very many, you know. And if it's that much a part of everybody's job, which it is, you know, most people, most professionals, you know, I'll ask a group of, say, human resources professionals, how much of your job would you say is problem solving? 99%, you know. So it's a big part of everybody's job. So, you know, I want to help you maybe think about some steps in a strategic problem solving process that you hadn't really thought about before, or you don't incorporate into your problem solving. And the question is to ask at those different steps so that you can get to the core problem, the root causes, make sure you've got the right information and quality information, and you know, and all the other steps involved in problem solving. So, you know, hopefully I think that's valuable to people.
Oh, definitely. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day about some of these underlying core competencies that we say we need in organizations, and what are we doing to actually support people to not, you know, it doesn't have to be formal training element, but what are we doing to help them identify that is a thing that they need to be good at? How good are they right now? What can they do to be better? How can we introduce them to new things? And one of the key ones you talked about earlier on as well is decision making. So, I mean, you talked about some of the blind spots that you know, the magicians play on and play up to. There, is there anything you can sort of share with us there in terms of what are some of those elements that you see in magic that you can potentially help people to make better decisions or problem solve better in that space?
Sure. Well, one thing that we do as magicians is we entice the audience's brain to make assumptions, just sometimes very subtly. You know, for example, if I have a deck of cards and I get it out and I want them to assume it's a normal deck of cards, even though it might be tricked up in some way.
Yep.
I'll get the deck out, I'll spread it out, I'll show all the cards, shuffle it. But if I said, look, I've got a normal deck of cards here, look how normal it is, it just reeks of normalcy, you know, that raises suspicion, right? So I get them to make assumptions. Oh, okay, they assume it. Or if I have a spectator on stage and I show them something, everybody says, okay, that must be on the up and up, you know. So, and assumptions are the bane of good decision making and problem solving, because it's so often that, and we do have to make assumptions, but when they're unchecked assumptions and we don't recognize the uncertainty in them, that's when we get into trouble. Right. And, you know, our brain loves certainty because, you know, I talk about the lizard brain. So the subconscious part of your brain, that its primary goal is keeping you alive.
Right. Yeah.
Your survival instinct. So it wants certainty, because if the more certain you are, the quicker you can act and react to a situation if you have certainty.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about the uncertainty of a squirrel in the middle of the road, and you come up and you're driving on it, and all of a sudden it takes off one way. Oh, no, then it takes off the other way and it goes zip, zip, zip. That's uncertainty. And that's kind of Brain doesn't like that because that squirrel's going to get killed.
Right. Yeah.
It wants certainty. So we take a notion, we think something is true, and our brain then turns it into an assumption that
Mm.
may or may not be true, and that affects us when we're assessing information. When you're problem solving, you're like, okay, what information do we need to solve this problem?
Mm.
And you think about all the different things you would need to know. You look at, okay, here's some things that we do know. This is where you get into trouble. You have to question everything, because some things you think you might not actually know. Because you're just assuming that you know it. So yeah, so assumptions are a fun thing that magicians like to play with, but we have to be careful of when we're making decisions and in the real world.
Yeah. I'm laughing to myself in some ways because I've watched a few videos of the great Randy, and if you're watching on the video here, you'll see that Steve's wearing glasses, and one of the, I'm looking like, are those actually glasses? Has he got lenses in there? Because that's one of the things he does. He will start his speech, and halfway through, he go, "You think I'm wearing glasses? There's no lenses in here. You think this is a
So,
microphone? It's actually something completely different." But
so what
because
do you think? Am I wearing lenses or not?
I'm going to say yes, you are wearing lenses. I've been Oh, you! I was trying. I'm trying to look for the light. You've got me. Absolutely got me.
But the reason I do it, it's not actually to trick you. It's because when I'm performing, I usually wear glasses
Right.
on stage, and so that's my look:
Right.
glasses and the hat.
Right.
And but on a Zoom call like this, you get glare,
Yep.
and I don't actually need the glasses to see close up. So I'm like, well, just wear some with no lenses, no glare.
Brilliant. I mean, even I was literally sitting here thinking, I'm looking for the glasses themselves, looking for the glare, and I still didn't catch it. So,
Well, you're the first person to call me out on it, so to bring it up.
so it's so coming back to those lessons. Then
Mhm.
is the lesson or one of the key bits that people can take away from that is it just the awareness of assumptions? Does that something that people can take away and raise their performance? Do they
Well,
need more than that?
awareness, yeah, recognition and awareness of our kind of our cognitive biases
Mm.
is important, and that's a step. But there are some things that you can do, you know, to mitigate their effects. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest is getting what I call the multiple angles,
Right.
multiple perspectives.
Mm.
So, as a magician, when you're a stage magician and you're rehearsing, what they what a stage magician will do if they're in a new venue, they will go out to the different corners, the different places in the audience, in the seating, to see if the angle is going to be conducive to the trick, because a lot
Right.
of tricks look great head on, but from the side you can see what's going on.
Right.
And so there's certain angles you don't want people to see.
Yeah.
Those people, if people sat there and could see, they would have a completely different perspective on the trick than other people.
Mm.
you know and I use an example of a picture that I get somebody on stage and I show them the picture, and then I show it to the audience and I say to the person on stage, who's the picture of? And they say, it's Albert Einstein. And everybody in the audience laughs because they say, no, it isn't, it's Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
Well, up close, it's actually a picture with a fuzzy picture of Marilyn Monroe and some details of Albert Einstein. So if you see it up close, you see the details and you
Right.
see Einstein. You don't see those details from far away. You see Marilyn Monroe. When you're close to the situation, this is, I guess you could call it a metaphor or an analogy. When
Yeah.
you're close to a situation, you can see the details, but you
Mm.
might not be able to see the big picture.
Right.
Likewise, if you're in leadership, you might be able to see the big picture, but you're not in the weeds. So you're not seeing how the problem is affecting, people that are at a different level than you are. So
Right.
you need to get multiple perspectives. As a magician, I don't want people to have multiple perspectives. I don't, and that's why, in a magic show, people generally, they can't get in a group and talk. How did he do that? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But and here's what research shows. It shows that we have all these cognitive biases and mental shortcuts and irrational impulses. It's very difficult for us to see them in ourselves.
Right.
Research shows that we can more easily see them in somebody else.
Mm.
And that means other people can see our blind spots better than we can, right? So
Right.
you need to make sure you're not going alone because your perspective is so limited just to what you can see. There's a phrase called "what you see is all there is."
Right.
W.Y. I think that was from Daniel Kahneman, and he's the psychologist.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he says that's an assumption too. That we make subconsciously, that you think that what you see, that's all the information that there is, that it's quality information, and that's what you got. Well, then you get another perspective in, and they'll say, no, well, no, it's not, because here's what I see.
Right.
So so that's, I think, is one of the most valuable things to keep in mind.
Yeah, and really speaks to the value of the value of a team, and the value of diversity in that team as well, and diversity of thought. Yeah, and just challenging each other's paradigms and perspectives on that. So that's wonderful.
Right. And to that point too, it's important for the organization to have an atmosphere of what they call psychological safety.
Yeah.
I never liked that term because it sounded kind of woo-woo, kind of, psychological safety. Yeah. But it's true. And Google did a study of their teams and found that the highest performing teams, the number one trait was psychological safety.
Right.
People are free. They feel comfortable. They're not going to fear reprisal if they bring up issues.
Right.
If they say, hey, this status quo, this process we're doing, I call it status quo and status quo bias, where we want to stay in our comfort zone. Well, somebody can say, look, I think we can do this better, or this isn't working very well. And that they're not going to be labeled a troublemaker or a squeaky wheel for bringing things up. They've got the psychological safety to do that, and to also take reasonable risks away from the status quo.
Yeah.
Because, it's only by doing new things, trying new approaches, that we can grow and innovate.
Yeah.
Right. So,
that's brilliant, and so many lessons to learn there, and just the conscious awareness of bias and the value of team and all sorts of importance of psychological safety. Some great points to take out from that in its own right, and I'm sure there's loads more as well. But I'm also interested in what you do to help yourself perform. So, what are the things that you do to keep yourself on top of your game?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I, having an entertainment background helped going into speaking. There's two kinds of speakers. There's ones that start as subject matter experts.
Yep.
And then they have to learn how to present in an engaging way. And then there's entertainers who already know how to present in an entertaining way, but they have to have content that is relevant, to their audience and useful. So I came from the entertainment background, but boy, did I learn. My first speaking engagement didn't go well.
Right.
I even stepped back for a year because I thought, maybe this isn't for me. But then I reassessed what I was doing. I learned, I got better. So anyway, I get coaching every year. So my goal is to get coaching in both presentation and business.
Right.
Because I'm running a business, and the speaking business, it has its own quirks compared to other businesses. So, the National Speakers Association, that's the big U.S. speaking association. And then we have our local chapters, and I was president of the Kentucky chapter for a while, and I've been in that group forever. So much to learn, so many people with valuable experience that are just so willing to share.
Yeah.
They want to, raise the sea, raise all ships.
Right.
Because if you go out there as a speaker and you do a great job, that makes people think highly of speakers in general.
Right.
You do a poor job, and that kind of reflects too.
Right.
That's true for magicians too. If people see a bad magician, then they think, yeah, I don't like magicians. So I get both business coaching and presentation. Now, and you might have talked about this, this is using an example a lot. Tiger Woods, he gets coaching every year. And you think, even when he was the top golfer in the world, still getting coaching, every year, because you can always improve. And again, this goes back to the whole thing about we have blind spots.
Yeah.
And I can watch myself, and it's really valuable and really difficult to watch yourself on video. Hate doing it, but it's so valuable because I can pick up so much. But even more valuable is having somebody else watch it, especially an experienced speaking coach,
right?
So that they can, help me improve it.
Right.
So, it's important for me to always do that. And it's easy to get into a lull and to get complacent, especially if you're getting successful.
Yeah.
And think, I'm good. I don't have anything else to learn. I know all there is to learn about speaking and performing, but you can always learn. The environment's always changing. Technology is always changing.
Yeah.
Speakers, a lot of speakers use a lot of different types of technology in their presentations.
Yep.
And I learned about one just fairly recently that I'm going to incorporate into my next talk about how to get referrals from the audience with a QR code.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, you're all, always be connected. And when you're a solopreneur, like I am,
Yeah.
it can get lonely. You can feel isolated.
Mm.
So it's important to have a support group. And that's, National Speakers Association, my local chapter, those are support groups. It's good to have accountability or mastermind groups as well. So people that are in a similar situation to you, and you can share victories and failures and, learn from each other. So
I think there's some amazing points there around, one, your blind spots and the coaches and the value that coaches can provide you. You talk about the two different angles there of your delivery, which can be different for anybody, but it's the technical skill coach, and then you've got the business coach. Recognizing that a lot of people, myself included, and others, you go into, particularly if you're going into a second career, there are so many things that you don't know, and just having somebody who can support you through that is immensely valuable. And the network, I've never been not surprised by just how valuable a network can be in terms of their giving nature and how much you can share with people and the importance of abundance there. So,
and it's motivating too, don't you think, Paul? Because it keeps you going.
Yeah.
You have just having an ear to unload on from time to time, somebody to listen to and somebody to talk to, that helps keep you going, especially when things go bad, when you have setbacks. It's really important to have a support group and people you can talk to who know what you're going through.
Precisely. Wonderful points we can all learn from on that point. So maybe a couple of sort of quicker questions then. If you could help any individual or team or organization with the skill set that you've got, who would you want that to be?
I've always thought about how my topics, problem solving, critical thinking, that it would be extremely important for you young people, like high school students, to learn that early. To learn more about critical thinking, and how to assess information, and how your mind works. I always think people should take a psychology course.
Right.
You should always be learning and finding out about recent research and what people are learning about what the brain does. But I think high school students would be, I don't know why critical thinking isn't taught as a subject mandatory for all teenagers.
The other side, I was talking to someone about, even if your education system is based on remembering stuff, nobody ever gets taught how to remember stuff. And there are techniques and things that you can learn as a skill to remember more stuff, but we never get taught that, even though, as flawed as it might be, our educational system, certainly in the UK, is based off what can you remember and regurgitate on the day. Just teach us how to remember stuff, and we'd get better results. So,
absolutely, yeah. And being able to distinguish a good argument from a faulty argument, that's part of critical thinking. That's really important, and how to think logically and rationally and all that. So I'd love to be able to get in front of some high school students and tell them what I know about the mind.
Superb. And I'm sure there's some opportunities out there as well. And so maybe if we flip it on its head and say, if you could sit down, have a drink, have a meal, have a coffee with somebody so that you could learn from them and help your performance improve, who would you want that to be?
Well, I think the first one would probably be Tim Ferriss.
Right.
Are you familiar with Tim?
I'm aware of Tim Ferriss. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So he's an author, and he has a podcast, the Tim Ferriss Show, that he's been doing for a long time. He wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, actually, a long time ago, which he doesn't like the title of that now, but he talks to elite performers in all areas. He talks to athletes and psychologists and business gurus, and he talks to some speakers, and he talks to actors and musicians, and people who perform at a high level and learns how do they do it, what's important to you, and how'd you go along this path, and what do you do to maintain your excellence,
Right.
And so I think he would be a wealth of information, because he has, he's talked to all of those people and he's learned all those things. In fact, he has a book, I have it somewhere here, called Tools of Titan.
Right.
Tools of Titans, which is a big book that contains some of the best bits from all of his guests that he's had on the show.
Oh, okay. Oh, fantastic! Maybe I'll pop a link in the show notes there, so people can look at that. And I think that's a wonderful answer, because it leverages the learning of so many other people as well. You've got yourself a great leverage point. So, I mean, Steve, some fascinating stuff, and so much we can all learn. And I'm sure, I've had a look at some of your reels and clips, and so much entertainment that goes along with that learning. And I think that's such a critical part. If people wanted to find out more, if people want to get in touch, or maybe find out about what you do, where do they go and how do they contact you?
Yeah, well, the main place, the central location, is my website. So it's stevehaffner.com, and that's SteveHaffner. And you can see the information, see the types of keynote programs that I do, and see some videos out there as well. And I have a couple of things you can get for free. One is a ebook. It's called 7 Strategies for Making Great Decisions. It's just a 25-page PDF. It's an easy read.
Brilliant.
And you can just sign up for it, and I'll get that to you. And I have a newsletter called Cognizance. So it's a weekly email newsletter. It just takes a few minutes to read, and I include links to articles and sites that talk about basically how to perform better. Performance. All of my topics: critical thinking, problem solving, how we can do better. So it's a fun email, and I always tell people, hey, if you don't like it, just unsubscribe. So and then you can check me out on LinkedIn as well. So that's my main social media platform that I use.
Brilliant. So we'll make sure that all of those links, as always, are in there. I'll definitely be signing up to that newsletter and checking out the ebook, and I recommend everybody else does as well. And I mean, it's so much more to learn, and so much entertainment to be had in the process. Edutaining, you might call it. So thanks so much for being on the show today, and I look forward to maybe speaking with you again at some point in the future. Thanks so much, Steve Haffner.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.